In the spring of 1720, Sir Isaac Newton, one of the most brilliant mathematical minds in human history, held a substantial fortune in the South Sea Company. He understood calculus, gravity, and the laws of planetary motion better than any living soul on Earth. Early on, sensing the market was overheating, Newton sold his shares for a massive profit. He famously remarked that he could calculate the motions of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. Yet just a few months later, as the frenzy reached euphoric heights, Newton couldn't stand watching his less intelligent peers grow effortlessly wealthy. He bought back in at the absolute top of the market. When the bubble burst, he lost nearly £20,000, the modern equivalent of millions of dollars, and spent the rest of his life forbidding anyone from uttering the words South Sea in his presence. Newton did not lose his wealth because he lacked intellect. He lost his wealth because he made the fundamental error that almost every analytical, highly educated person makes when they enter the world of money. He treated a psychological crowd as if it were a physical equation. If you are an analytical thinker, an engineer, a programmer, a physician, or an ambitious knowledge worker, you have spent your entire life learning a fundamental truth. The more variables you analyze, the more complex the problem you can solve. In software engineering, complexity allows you to build scalable architecture. In medicine, precise diagnostic models save lives. In academia and corporate strategy, intellectual horsepower is rewarded with status, promotions, and breakthrough results. So when smart people turn their attention to personal finance and wealth building, they instinctively bring the exact same cognitive toolkit to the table. They build 20-tab financial spreadsheets. They research macroeconomic cycles, backtest multi-factor algorithmic portfolios, obsess over tax loss harvesting microstrategies, and pore over quarterly balance sheets looking for an edge. They assume that because they possess high intelligence, their financial strategy must be equally sophisticated to produce superior results. And then, something deeply frustrating happens. Over a 10, 15, or 20-year horizon, roughly 95% of actively managed funds and hyper-intelligent traders underperform a single brainless index fund that buys the entire market and does absolutely nothing. The smartest people in the room consistently lose to an automated strategy designed by someone who refused to play the game. Why? To understand why intelligence so often backfires in finance, we have to look at the first invisible cognitive engine, physics envy. Physics is the study of deterministic systems. If you calculate the trajectory of a rocket using Newton's laws, the rocket does not change its mind midway through flight because it read a negative headline about gravity. The physical laws remain constant whether you observe them or not. Financial markets, however, are not physical systems. They are reflexive, evolutionary biological networks. A market is simply a massive shifting crowd of millions of human nervous systems, each reacting to their own fears, debts, margin calls, and cognitive biases. When you introduce a brilliant mathematical formula to a market, the market immediately digests that formula, adapts, and changes its behavior. The moment everyone thinks they have found a predictable pattern, the pattern disappears. When an analytical person tries to apply hard science precision to a biological system, they don't produce accuracy. They produce the precision bias. The precision bias is the dangerous cognitive error of confusing precision with accuracy. Precision is how many decimal places your model calculates. Accuracy is whether your model actually reflects the real world. A financial model that calculates your projected net worth in the year 2042 down to 3 decimal places looks formidable. It feels objective. It gives the brain a profound illusion of certainty. But that model cannot predict if your industry will be disrupted in 5 years. It cannot predict if your marriage will survive, if a war will cut off global supply chains, or if a sudden liquidity panic will force you to liquidate your assets at the exact worst moment. By obsessing over precision, the intelligent mind burns immense cognitive bandwidth optimizing for a 0.5% theoretical edge, while remaining completely blind to the catastrophic risks that actually determine financial survival. You spend 20 hours analyzing historical price-to-earnings ratios, while ignoring whether your cash buffer is large enough to keep you from panic selling during a 40% market drawdown. You measure the micro details with a microscope, while walking completely blindfolded along the edge of a cliff. This brings us to the second, deeper trap, the Intellect-as-Ego Dilemma. For an ambitious, intelligent person, simplicity feels like an insult. If someone tells an engineer with a master's degree that the most effective way to build generational wealth is to automatically buy a total market index fund every month, hold 6 months of cash in a safe baseline, and never touch the portfolio for 25 years, their brain rebels. It sounds too basic. It leaves no room for their intellectual superiority to shine. It offers no puzzle to solve, no complex code to write, and no strategy to outsmart the competition. Subconsciously, smart people often feel that if a strategy is easy to understand, it cannot possibly be lucrative. They equate complexity with competence and effort with reward. So they add complexity not because the system requires it, but because their identity demands it. They trade complex derivatives, chase exotic alternative investments, rotate sectors, and constantly tweak their asset allocation. They create friction where none should exist, simply to prove to themselves that they are doing the work. And in finance, complexity is not just an inconvenience. Complexity is a silent financial tax. Every added trade generates transaction fees. Every rebalance triggers taxable capital gains. And most dangerously of all, every single layer of complexity creates a new potential point of psychological failure. In systems engineering, there is a famous principle known as Gall's law. It states that a complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that worked. A complex system designed from scratch never works and cannot be patched up to make it work. When you design an overly complex financial strategy, you create tight coupling. In engineering, a tightly coupled system has zero tolerance for error. If one tiny component fails, the entire machine locks up and explodes. A simple, loosely coupled financial engine, one with low debt, wide cash cushions, automated investments, and minimal moving parts, can absorb massive real-world shocks. A sudden job loss, a global recession, or a market crash barely dents its structure. It is designed for survival across 100 different unpredictable futures, not optimized for one specific, predicted outcome. Over-optimization is the enemy of resilience. The financial graveyards are not filled with ignorant people who kept their lives simple. They are filled with brilliant people who built hyper-optimized, highly leveraged systems that worked perfectly right up until the day reality did something their spreadsheet said was impossible. So what is the shift that leads to genuine financial sovereignty? It is the realization that in finance, temperament always defeats intellect. The true competitive moat in wealth building is not knowing more than the market. It is having the humility to build a boring moat. A boring moat has 3 core structural rules. First, automate away your IQ. Take your intelligence out of the daily execution loop. Set up automatic, unthinking transfers of capital into broad, diversified, productive assets the moment your income arrives. If your strategy requires daily brilliance to succeed, it is already broken. Second, optimize for survival, not precision. Replace delicate mathematical targets with wide safety margins. Hold enough liquid, uninvested cash reserves that no market crash can ever force you to sell your productive assets at a loss. In investing, staying in the game is 90% of the victory. And third, embrace radical simplicity. Understand that the ultimate sophistication is not adding another layer of analysis. It is having the discipline to let a simple, robust system compound in absolute silence. True financial sovereignty does not come from outsmarting the machine. It comes from building an engine so simple, so durable, and so boring that the machine cannot break you. And yet, once you strip away all the unnecessary complexity and set up a simple, robust financial engine, you are immediately confronted with the hardest variable of all. A variable that has nothing to do with math and everything to do with human biology, time. In our next essay, we will explore why the human brain is biologically wired to hate compounding, and how understanding the invisible linear phase of exponential growth is the only way to survive the years where nothing seems to happen.